Hallo Leute, willkommen zu Notruf Deutsch, a series of videos that are recorded, designed specifically to help people catch up after term one. So you're taking German with me at McMaster University. We're now between the terms, and this is just a refresher and also kind of in German we say der rote Faden, the red thread, kind of a guidelines for how to catch up for people who feel that they're lost in our course. So season one, episode two, verbs, verbs, verbs. We're going to talk about verbs today. Okay. So verbs in German. Things are not as difficult as they might seem. So the normal verbs, we're going to, you already learned the three core verbs. Ich bin, du bist, er ist. Ich habe, du hast, er hat. Ich werde, du wirst, er wird, and so on. Those were the three core verbs. Then I taught you the six tricky, we call them special verbs because, well, they're special. They're different than the normal verbs. And these verbs were ich will, du willst, er will. Ich darf, du darfst, er darf. Ich muss, du musst, er muss. Ich soll, du sollst, er soll. Ich mag, du magst, er mag. And there's a sixth one. I don't know. I always forget the sixth one, whatever it is. So go look it up on the previous in the previous video. So those were the special verbs because they don't add anything here and they don't add anything here, and they also change in the plural. Remember how we said ich will, but wir wollen. Ich muss, but wir müssen, and so on. Ich darf, wir dürfen. So they have separate plural and singular forms. And normal verbs are a lot easier because they don't change. They just add an ending. So if we take a normal verb, such as, let's say, lernen, right? So en at the end simply means that it's an infinitive, that it means to learn. In English, you say to learn, but in German, lernen. By the way, we can still see that English verbs used to be just like the German verbs with the en at the end. We kept it in such words as brighten, to broaden, widen, and so on and so forth, right? So those verbs actually have the en. They retain the Anglo-Saxon Germanic en. So back to lernen or some other frequent verbs, kommen, or ich weiß nicht, kochen, schreiben. So we don't capitalize verbs in German, only nouns. So, yeah, when we work with these verbs, this en is changeable. It can change to the ending that you need. So if you want to say that you study, then you would say ich. You would look up the ending here on the chart. It's e. So ich lerne. If you want to say that you are learning or you learn, du lernst. So see what we did? We took the en of lernen and we gave it the ending from the chart. So ich lerne, du lernst, er, sie, es lernt, and so on. Wir lernen, ihr, you guys learn, ihr lernt, sie lernen. So that is how normal verbs work. I teach my students mnemonic device. You read this in English, ichi, and then you read the second one, dust, and then you just read the endings. So normally I don't include this, so then it works better. Ichi dust 10 10. Ichi dust 10 10. You know, like itchy dust, ichi dust 10 10. What's the deal with these little a's in brackets? So brackets show that they're optional. It means that sometimes we add them and sometimes we don't. It's actually quite easy. We add them if it's difficult to pronounce the word without it. So, for example, consider the word to work, arbeiten. Arbeiten, no, not arbeiten, which would mean to loot. Arbeiten, arbeiten, right? So let's just stick with this verb for now. Arbeiten, to work. So we're going to eliminate the en, and ich arbeite works But what if we want to say you work, you're working? We would have to say du arbeitest. This it's hard to pronounce. So we're going to say du arbeitest. In lernen, du lernst, it's actually easier to pronounce. Du arbeitest. No. Du arbeitest. Or he works, she works, sie arbeitet. Because if we didn't add the A, it would have been du, sie arbeitet. That is hard to pronounce. So generally, it's the verbs that end in T, in T, or Z. So sitzen, sitzen. No, du sitzt. No, ignore what I just said. So sometimes we add this E here. Yeah, ich arbeite, du arbeitest, er arbeitet, and so on. So sitzen doesn't work. Tanzen, ich tanze, du tanzt. No. So verbs that end in T. All right, and the verbs that end in D, there we go. Now I remember. Finden, to find. So ich finde, but du findest. Because if you don't add the E, then you're going to have du findest. And that is hard to pronounce. So du findest, sie findet. That's all there is about easy verbs. It's really super easy. There's simple verbs. We call them the normal verbs. They always follow the pattern. So that's what they are. Okay, separable verbs. They could be otherwise normal verbs or they could be tricky verbs, but they all follow the same pattern. Ich das 10-10. So each verb in German can have this special prefix that goes in front of it. In English, they usually go after the verb. So in English, we have to drop, but we also have to drop somebody off. Right? In English, it's not a prefix, it's a particle, it goes after the verb. But in German, instead of to drop off, we would say something like to off, drop. So the off would go before the verb. So gehen can become ausgehen, mitgehen, zugehen, aufgehen, abgehen. There is a long list of these different prefixes, and they change the meaning of the verb completely sometimes. So gehen means to go, but ausgehen means to run out of, right? Or kommen means to come, but mitkommen means to come along, or umkommen means to die. So they do change the meaning of the verb. They can change the meaning of the verb quite a bit. They're called separable. Why is that? They're called separable because when we use a verb with that separable thing, it separates. That's what it does. So ich gehe, right? I go. But you would say ich gehe aus. Right? Well, ich gehe aus. Actually, you can use it like that to mean that I'm going out, but we run out of something, for example. Or lernen, lernen, to learn. Zu lernen means to learn additionally, to learn along, to learn something extra. Zu lernen, ich lerne zu. Kochen means to cook. Abkochen means to boil, you know, when you kind of disinfect stuff by boiling it in water, instruments or doctor's instruments or whatever. So kommen, umkommen, or mitkommen, to come along. Schreiben, to write. Aufschreiben, to write down. So what we're going to say now, we're going to stick to schreiben. So ich schreibe, I'm writing, or I write, but ich schreibe auf. I write, I'm writing, or I'm writing things down. So ich schreibe, I don't know, eine E-Mail. I'm writing an email. Ich schreibe eine E-Mail auf. I'm writing down an email. It's actually an awkward sentence, but you get how it works. Or for example, du kommst mit. You are coming along. Du kommst mit. So mit goes to the end. Mit would go to the end. There could be other elements here. So du kommst auf die Party mit. You're coming along to the party. Du kommst ins Kino mit, right? Du kommst mit. You are coming to the party. So what I just said, technically, In modern German, a lot of people put it at the end. So, du kommst mit ins Kino, du kommst mit auf die Party. But just to stay consistent in this course, because we're still learning, just to make sure that we follow the rules. Du kommst, I don't know, heute Abend mit, tonight. You're coming along. Du kommst heute Abend mit. So the separable prefixes will always go to the end of your sentence. Don't get me wrong, there are other rules around about this, so it's not always like that. But at this point, if you always put them at the end, you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong. Later, as you progress, you will find what things when you can violate these rules or when they don't apply. So for now, I don't want you to think about that. So whenever somebody actually does this action, then this separable prefix goes to the end. When do they stick like this? When do the verbs stay like this? Ausgehen, zulernen, abkochen, and so on. Or I guess some more frequent examples would be Fernsehen, to watch TV, or what I did with my students a lot, aussehen, to look like. So Fernsehen, to watch TV, aussehen, to look like, to watch TV, aussehen, to look. So remember, in our stories, Fred sieht gut aus. Fred looks good, or I don't know, Wolfgang und Rita sehen fern. They're watching TV. See, fern is at the end, although here it was in the beginning. Fern goes to the end here. Fred sieht gut aus. Here, aus was in the beginning. Now it goes to the end. When do the verbs stay like that? Aussehen and so on. Well, we do use infinitives after those special verbs that we learned. Ich will, ich muss, ich kann, ich darf. So Fred will gut aussehen. Now, the actual verb that Fred does is will. And aussehen goes to the end. And just as a refresher from the last video, why is aussehen at the end? Because it's an infinitive and it's the second verb in the sentence, right? So verb number one goes to the second position, and then the infinitive goes to the end. Fernsehen. Ich möchte heute Abend nur Fernsehen. So I want tonight only to watch TV. Fernsehen. Now you see this fern is in the beginning because we're just keeping the verb like that. But if you want to say ich sehe heute Abend mit meiner Frau fern. Oh, I will be watching TV. So I watch tonight with my wife TV, right? So fern. That's how separable verbs work. Coming to the next point, the normal verbs and the superpower of the present tense. You heard me say things like, when I was talking about these examples. So tonight I said I will watch TV, or I am writing things down. But in German, they all correspond to the present tense. So I study, I'm studying, I do study, I will study. They are all expressed by the present tense. So when you say things like ich schreibe, it means I write, or I'm writing, or I will write, right? Or if you say things like ich sehe heute Abend fern, I will be watching TV. Although you're using the present tense, ich sehe heute Abend fern. It's the heute Abend, the tonight, technically today in the evening, heute Abend, that makes it future. In English, we use the present tense to indicate future all the time as well. So for example, oh, I'm studying, I studying, no, give me a sec. Of course, now it doesn't work when I'm looking at you, when I'm recording this. But in English, this happens all the time. So yeah, I'll think of the example, of course. As soon as I stop recording, I'll think of an example. I watch TV, I study medicine. No, of course, now I'm drawing a blank, but it will come to me as soon as I finish recording this video, and then I'll make a special note about it. So it works like that in English as well. Okay. Um, all right. So the present tense in German, the ich, das, 10-10 pattern, corresponds to four different structures in English. So never ever try to say things like ich bin studieren, ich bin lernen. It doesn't work. Instead of to say I am studying, you have to say ich lerne. So ich bin lernen doesn't work. It doesn't exist. It's not natural. Don't say it in German. All right, tricky verbs. So tricky verbs are the ones that also follow the ich, does, 10-10 pattern. But you see how I put a little star here and here, and that means that the verb, the actual word, changes a little bit. So we have three patterns. The ich sehe, it's a normal verb. Ich sehe, see, there's no star. But then when you use du, something happens there. Ich sehe, du siehst, du siehst, du siehst. And then there is another star in after er, sie, es. So that's where you're going to say er sieht. See how this is different than what we had before? So that is the change that happened. So we started with an A and ich sehe, wir sehen, ihr seht, sie sehen, but then it turned into du siehst, er sieht. Fahren, that's the same thing. Ich fahre means I drive. Du changes in the du form, it changes to fährst, er fährt. So a changes to to a umlaut. Ich fahre, du fährst, er fährt. Geben, ich gebe, du gibst, er, or you know the phrase as gibt, you know, just to diversify this a little bit. Sie fährt, es gibt. So, ich gebe, we started with an A, now I have the I. Ich gebe, du gibst, er gibt. I think my cat wants to get in. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, it's a funny thing with animals. They always want to be on the opposite side of the door no matter where they are, right? So if I let the cat in, if I close the door, the cat will want out. Okay, so these are the tricky verbs, and you can't predict which verb will actually do that. So there are groups of verbs that I will be asking you guys to memorize. So ichi, does, 10-10 is our normal pattern. Then the tricky verbs change a little bit in addition to having those endings, but you can't predict which verbs will do that. So we put them in groups, and I will be asking you to memorize these verbs. So if you haven't done that, that's what you need to do. So the first group is sehen, that is very frequently used with with separable prefixes. So sehen turns into Fernsehen or aussehen, lesen, stehlen. So sehen, ich sehe, du siehst, er sieht, ich fernsehe, ich sehe fern, du siehst fern, er sieht fern. Aussehen, ich sehe aus, du siehst aus, er sieht aus, lesen, ich lese, du liest, changes to the long E, er liest, stehlen, ich stehle, du stiehlst, er stiehlt. The second group, like geben, A changes to E, ich breche, du brichst, ich esse, du isst, ich gebe, du gibst, ich helfe, du hilfst, ich nehme, du nimmst, ich spreche, du sprichst, and so on. And the third group, A changes to A umlaut, ich backe, du bäckst, ich fahre, du fährst, ich falle, du fällst, ich fange, du fängst, and so on. So with separable prefixes, the separable prefix still detaches. Ich fange an, du fängst an. So that is still there. Anfangen, anhalten. Ich halte an, du hältst an. Ich lade ein, einweiht. Du lädst ein. And so on. Ich schlafe ein, I fall asleep. Du schläfst ein. And so on. So those are the verbs that I want you to memorize, and that's what those tricky verbs are. So after all, it's not that bad. We have 4 verbs here, 4, 5, 10 here, so that's 14. Now we have 20, 23, 26, 28, 30 verbs. So we have 30 verbs that you need to know, memorize them as groups. So that should be pretty easy, right? Okay, the past tense. The past tense is very similar to English sometimes. So see how in English we say I study, but I studied. I look, but I looked. I cook, but I cooked. You add the t sound that you spell as ed. Now in German, instead of it, you add t. Lernen, lernte, ich schaute, ich kochte. So you need this te, this together, this gives us the past tense form, lernte. In English, I studied, you studied, she studied, we studied, there are no endings. But in German, we do have some endings. So ich lernte, lernte doesn't change. See, there is nothing here. That's why it's red, there's nothing here. Ich lernte, du lerntest. Du lerntest, er lernte. And then the plural, wir lernten, ihr lerntet und sie lernten. Lernten. You see that it's not lernten, although en is the plural ending, en, so it's lernten. It doesn't become double a. Sie lernten. So that is super easy, right? Well, life wouldn't be what it is if things were this easy, because unlike these easy verbs that just add t, a lot of verbs don't add t, they change more, or maybe in addition to t. So for example, rennen, which means to run, rennen turns into rannte. It changes the vowel and it adds a t. Schreiben turns into schrieb, lesen turns into las. So you can't predict. So it won't be rente. You have to say rannte. It's not schreibte. Ich schreibte. I wrote, writed, right? I wrote, lesen. It's not ich leste. Ich las. So you can't predict which verbs will follow this pattern. Well, actually, there are no single pattern. There are many patterns that they could follow. So in such cases, it's easier to memorize which verbs don't follow the regular pattern by adding te, such as lernte, lernte, kochte, schaute, and so on. So instead, I'm asking you to memorize these 40 verbs with their past tense form. So geben, gab, kommen, kam, gehen, ging, sehen, sah, and so on. If you, rule of thumb is for now, if when you're still beginners, if you don't know, if the verb is not on that list, add te to it. If you can't look things up, of course, if you're in front of your computer and you can look up the past tense, look it up. Okay, so if you memorize these 40 verbs with their past tense forms, then you'll have the past tense covered. So once again, to form past tense in German, you need a past tense form, which could be ich lernte, and then you add the ending, which for ich is nothing, but for the other ones, there are some endings. Or if it's not lernte, if a verb changes more, then you find out what that form is. So ich sehe, ich sah, sehen, ich sah, lassen, ich ließ, stehen, ich stand, finden, ich fand, bleiben, ich blieb, and so on. Okay, and the last point that we discussed in the course is imperative. Imperative means giving commands. So you give commands when you talk to other people. You normally don't give commands to yourself. So there is no imperative for ich, because you don't say study to yourself, right? You say something like ich muss lernen, ich muss lernen. Now, however, when you talk to somebody who you call du, there are commands that you can give. So this is how it works. You are going to form the do form of the verb. So for example, du kommst. And then you get rid of this. Du kommst. So we're going to get rid of du and we're going to get rid of the ending. Komm. That is your imperative. Komm. That's how you talk to one person. Komm. If your verb has a separable prefix, komm mit. Come along. That's your request. Komm. If you're talking to a third person, let him come. Um, no, that won't work because if you're giving a command, you're talking to a different person. So there is no imperative for here. Wir. Wir works when you give a wir command. Oh, let's do something in German. It's super easy. Kommen wir mit. It's something like let's go, or singen wir, let's sing, or I don't know, lernen wir Deutsch, let's learn German, lernen wir Deutsch, or fahren wir nach Hause. That's it. You just form the plural form with wir, you reverse the two. Kommen wir, fahren wir nach Hause, singen wir. Yeah. The ihr imperative works also quite easily. So remember the ihr, and here it is, you add the ending to. So ihr, let's say, kommt mit, right? So what you do is you get rid of the ihr, and that's your command, kommt mit, or ihr lernt, you are studying. All you do is you get rid of the ihr, lernt. That is your imperative now. That is your imperative. Lernt, kommt mit, or singt, sing. So we started with ihr singt, but then we're just going to see it's capitalized. It shouldn't be. It's just auto correct. Singt. And then sie is the easiest one of all because you don't even change anything. Fahren Sie, drive. Fahren Sie weg, drive away. Fahren Sie weiter, keep driving. Lernen Sie Deutsch, learn German. Or singen Sie. See? Super easy. You just keep the same form, but you reverse Sie. So essentially it works like the wir imperative. So kommen wir mit, kommen Sie mit. Kommen Sie mit. And that's it. That's all there is. So I know it's a lot of information, but hopefully this can bring some clarity to German verbs in the present and the simple past tense. And I guess I'll see you guys in episode 3. Tschüss.